2000 to 2004, the birth of an empire has come. From the realms of Sweden arrives a new flavor on an old classic. Where Sid Meier once stood as the king, a new crown had been placed upon another's head. He shall rise to become one of the most well-known, beloved, and feared names in all the video gaming world. He is inevitable. He is inescapable. He is Carolus Raiminam. Paradox Interactive. We all know Paradox Interactive. They are indeed one of the most well-known names on the scene and are undoubtedly deserving of that title, for better or for worse. Paradox, in operation since the late 90s and as an independent developer since 2004, has been a big player in the online gaming market, bringing to us city builders, simulators, and of course, grand strategy. Games like Hearts of Iron, Victoria, Europa Universalis, Crusader Kings, and Stellaris. That does beg a question though. What the hell is a grand strategy?
Hello and welcome, I'm TWK. What you heard there was a voice in the back of my head. Don't mind him, normally he mumbles about nonsense. Nevertheless, grand strategy is a great genre with a lot of variety to it. From the medieval era to the hyper-future, with basic game premises according to the definition.
A grand strategy wargame or grand strategy game, GSG, is a wargame that places focus on grand strategy, military strategy at the level of movement and use of a nation-state or empire's resources.
In other words, games that give you control of a nation, or army, or other such command structure that allows you to lead it to your heart's content within the confines of the game itself. And most notably, is used as a general catch-all term for map games. On that note, for Paradox there are let's go with 5 cities in their lineup that are grand strategy. Let's go over them now, in chronological order of in-game time periods. A new dynasty arises, a heir is born, and the legacy of a kingdom is cemented. Crusader Kings is a series about creating the perfect inbred royal dynasties of the most Herculean, intelligent, and beautiful monarchs. Rather than play strictly as a kingdom, or barony, or empire, or duchy, or whatever, you play as a nation's ruling dynasty, which very well could change their holdings through succession, war, and democracy. The game's main focus is, at the end of the day, your monarchs, and how you interact with them, and the world around them. Make alliances, arrange marriages, kill your cousin so you can steal his claim to the throne. The game series originally began in 2004 and just had its most recent release last year in 2020 with CK3, which took the work of its predecessors and gave it a new fresh coat of paint, as well as a list of new features and tools to help you rule. Or be murdered because you accidentally started worshipping Satan. The franchise as a whole has held up pretty well, and while the first game has fallen off the map, the second game, now free on Steam, is still played here and there by fans, while the third game rose to critical acclaim for its depth of detail and how impressive it could be at times. Just don't zoom out. Don't look at the map. Ever.
The crown falls upon the heir to a mighty empire. Transitioning from Crusader Kings, Europa Universalis goes from focusing on your monarchs to focusing on the kingdom they rule throughout the centuries. The first of their major grand strategy series, the first Europa Universalis released in 2000, and its most recent title in 2013, which is still getting updated with the new DLC and patches to this day. Fun! Europa Universalis as a game series is similar to Crusader Kings in that it takes place well before the modern age, with the game spanning from around the 15th to 19th centuries, starting in the Age of Discovery and usually ending in the Age of Revolutions or the Age of Conservatism. All of the games follow the general principle that there isn't entirely set national paths. Whereas other Paradox grand strategies set up agendas for nations, the Europa series gives them a guideline on things they should do, and you and the AI can do, after that, anything you want. Both you and the AI are free to romp around and do whatever you please. And while it does diversify gameplay and make most playthroughs feel unique, it also leads to questionable choices on the AI's behalf. The colonization of the Americas, technological advancement into the age of gunpowder and rifles, and conquest. These are the tenets of all the Europa Universalis games, with tweaks and changes here and there to keep the series feeling fresh and revitalized with each passing title. The game series today is one of their most beloved of paradoxes, but the series as a whole is also one of the namesakes of their DLC policy, EU4's Completed Edition. Wow. An age of blood and iron, and taxing poor people, slaughtering socialists, and invading China. The Victorious series, only 2 games long, began in 2003 and only had its most recent edition in 2010, with seemingly no new game in sight for the foreseeable future. Sad. Regardless, Victoria's 2 games, Victoria and Empire Under the Sun and Victoria 2, are games that center, obviously, around the Victorian era, which is known globally as the century of German and Italian unification, the scramble for Africa, the shattering of the old concert of Europe balance, and the true rise and spread of Western influence globally. The 19th century was, safe to say, a bit hectic, and the game attempts to reflect this with a dynamic economic system, harsh diplomatic system, and simplistic military system that attempts to put you in the chair of an 1800s president, or king, or communist dictator. Whereas most of Paradox-ran strategy games focus on expansion and conquest, Victoria as a whole generally attempts to double down on hybridization of economics, political intricacy, and realpolitik. And conquering underdeveloped nations in Africa. Resource management, economic stimulation, government policy, and diplomacy becomes the game's main tools to keep the player on their feet, rather than just focusing on war like the next game on this list. But we'll get to that. Victoria as a whole has been generally well received, barring aside some questionable design choices such as Yellow Prussia. The first game, despite having fallen off the map by this point, holds its legacy as its sequel, which is, some 10 years later, still being played on streams and nostalgia trips to a bygone era when Paradox sold only 1 or 2 DLCs for their games, and had some, let's just say, dated graphics. War is hell is an often poorly attributed quote. Sherman wasn't saying that war was bad to a degree that it shouldn't be done. It was that it should be made for as much misery and suffering as humanly possible to inflict on your enemies. Where better to do that than Hearts of Iron? Hearts of Iron series began in 2002 with its most recent entry, Hearts of Iron 4, coming out in 2016. The series, as a whole, focuses primarily on the age of World War II as well as the few years prior to and after the conflict, and centers itself around combat entirely. While yes, some resource management and politics do exist, they're all more as a side note compared to the main meat of the games. They're World War II games. Of course the focus will be war. It's in the name of the thing they're focusing around. Balancing out technological advancements and internal disputes over what flag you fly, the main fun of the game is taking up your armed forces and smashing them into the enemy in creative, often seemingly crazy ways, and how it allows you to mess with history in rather, odd methods. Once you've chosen a nation, you can frankly do whatever you want. Stay historical or go crazy. Hell, conquer the world with communist Luxembourg for all it matters. The game offers focus trees to help you and the NPCs keep on historical paths, but they can be randomized to allow the NPCs to do crazy things or allow you to just go mad. Regardless, the games all did fairly pretty well, and Hearts of Iron 4 is still alive and well to this day with new DLC coming out every once in a while to add in some more content for you to mess around with. One of the largest parts of the Hearts of Iron series, however, has been the modding community. While we do intend to make videos dedicated to some of the larger of these mods in the future, the community has worked tirelessly on both the current and previous Hearts of Iron games to add in new content, new scenarios, and memes. A lot of those last ones. Or sure as hell, ain't it?
Space. The final frontier. Cliché intro aside, Stellaris is a prime example of a 4x grand strategy. Starting from your home planet, expand your space empire through democracy, and of course war, with a lot of variety both to your empire and the starting conditions. Stellaris is a game where in your first playthrough you'll play as a friendly democratic space penguin empire, and by the 20th you'll play as a all-devouring xenophobic hive mind. Stellaris can be enjoyed in a variety of ways, with each playthrough offering different challenges depending on your empire. After a safe time period, the player sets themselves, a super event will happen and threaten the whole galaxy. Here the player will choose whether to take it on by themselves or ally with their past enemies.
Well, that should be all 5 of Paradox's major grand strategy franchises. While Paradox does do other content and make other games other than this style, Moreover, many different companies have time and time again thrown their hat into the ring. Paradox is to this day still the best at what they do, even if it comes with a price tag. On that note, I believe it's time we wrap.
What about Imperator Rome?
Imperator Rome? More like Impera Bor Rome. Ooh, kill me.
Well, on that note, see you sometime within the next millennia.
Wipe out any life form that seems to be a threat. We'll serve them up a genocide they never will forget. 'Cause if we miss a couple, they'll breed a couple more. And soon we'll all be hating twice as many as before. You see, aliens can never be as good as humankind. A more delightful race than